I never wanted this job. Security contractor at a classified military installation in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, but after 3 tours in Afghanistan, civilian life wasn't sticking, and the pay was good. Plus, the routine helped. Same thing every night. That's what I liked about it. Until last Tuesday. I was doing my regular patrol just like always, midnight shift, walking the perimeter road that circles the outer hangars. Most people think Area 51 is one building where they hide the aliens or whatever. It's not. It's a sprawling complex with dozens of structures scattered across miles of desert. My job was simple. Check the decommissioned hangars, make sure nothing's disturbed, report anything unusual. The night was clear, stars everywhere. That's one good thing about this place. The stars. No light pollution for 50 miles, so you get the full show. The air had that desert chill that always surprises people. Days might hit 100, but nights drop fast out here. I'd just finished checking Hangar E7 when I saw it, about 200 yards east of my position, half buried in sand. We'd had a bad sandstorm the previous weekend, not unusual this time of year. But this was different. It looked like the storm had uncovered something, not buried it. A hangar, rusty metal walls, corrugated steel roof partially caved in, the kind of structure that had been around since the Cold War testing days. I stopped walking, checked my patrol map on my tablet. Sure enough, there it was. Hangar E9. But here's the thing. I'd been working this route for 14 months, and I'd never seen this building before. Never checked it, never reported on it, never even walked past it. I radioed in. Base, this is King. I'm at grid coordinates 3714, seeing a structure I don't recognize. Hangar E9 according to my map. Requesting confirmation. The radio crackled. King, this is base. Confirm Hangar E9 is on your patrol route. Proceed with standard inspection. Standard inspection. Right. For a building I'd never seen before. I approached slowly, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. The sand had drifted against one side, almost to the roof in places. The main doors faced west, massive steel sliding doors, the kind that would normally open to let aircraft in and out. They were sealed shut with corrosion, orange rust bleeding down in streaks. No footprints around the perimeter except mine. No tire tracks, no signs anyone had been here in years. I tried the small personnel door built into one of the big hangar doors. Locked tight. The keypad next to it was dead. No lights, no power. Protocol said I should photograph the exterior, check for signs of entry, and move on. So that's what I did. Took pictures with my phone, walked the perimeter, checked all potential entry points. Nothing looked disturbed. Just an old, forgotten building that somehow appeared on my patrol route but not in my memory. After completing my rounds, I headed back to the guardhouse to file my report. The night shift was quiet. Just me, Rosa Calhoun, my supervisor, and 2 other guards watching the main entrance a mile away. Rosa was at her desk when I walked in, staring at her computer screen. She barely looked up when I approached. Got something weird to report, I said, setting my tablet down. Hangar E9. It's on my patrol map, but I swear it wasn't there before. Must have been uncovered by that sandstorm last weekend. She took my tablet, glanced at the photos I'd uploaded. Looks normal to me, King. Normal? I've been walking that same route for over a year. Never seen this building before. Rosa shrugged. It's on the map. Has been since I started here. She tapped a few keys, filed my report, and handed the tablet back. Anything else? I wanted to push it, but something about her flat tone made me hesitate. No, that's it. Good. Finish your shift. I went back out, completed my patrol, then drove home as the sun came up. Spent the day thinking about that hangar. Why hadn't I ever noticed it before? Was I losing my mind? I even checked old satellite images of the base online, but of course the good stuff is censored. Just pixelated squares where the interesting parts should be. The next night, I arrived for my shift early. Wanted to check the patrol map carefully before heading out. Pulled up the digital display, zoomed in on the area where I'd found hangar E9. It wasn't there. I refreshed the screen. Nothing. Zoomed out, then in again. The hangar was gone from the map. Just empty desert where I'd seen a building with my own eyes the night before. This had to be some kind of mistake. I checked yesterday's report. It was still in the system, with my photos attached. The building existed. I'd seen it. But now the official map showed nothing at those coordinates. I decided to check for myself, took one of the patrol vehicles and drove straight to the spot. The headlights cut through the darkness, and there it was, hangar E9, exactly where I'd found it. Still half buried in sand, still rusted and abandoned. I got out, walked around it again, took more photos, including one of my GPS coordinates displayed on my phone next to the building. Evidence. When I got back to the guardhouse, Rosa was at her desk again, same position as the night before. I pulled up a chair across from her. "We need to talk about hangar E9, I said. She looked up slowly. "What about it?" "It's gone from the patrol map, completely erased, but it's still physically out there. I just checked." Rosa's eyes didn't quite focus on me. They seemed to look through me, like I was made of glass. After a few seconds of uncomfortable silence, she finally spoke. "King, you need to stick to your assigned route. The maps are updated by command for security reasons. If something's not on your patrol route, you don't need to check it." "But it was there yesterday, on the map and in reality. Today it's only there in reality. Doesn't that seem strange to you?" She stared at me with those unfocused eyes. Her pupils looked different, too wide for the bright office lights. When she spoke again, her voice had a slight delay, like each word was being carefully chosen. "Stick to your assigned route, King. That's an order." I sat back, studying her face. Something was off. Rosa had always been professional, maybe a bit rigid, but never like this. Never vacant. And she'd never dismissed a security concern before. "Yes, ma'am," I said, finally standing up. "I'll stick to my route." I walked out of the guardhouse, the desert night stretching before me. The stars didn't seem so beautiful anymore. As I started my patrol, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Not just with a mysteriously appearing and disappearing hangar, but with Rosa, too. Why would a hangar vanish from official records overnight? And what happened to my supervisor that made her suddenly not care? I wasn't ready to go home after my shift, not with what happened with Rosa and that hangar mess. So I drove around the outer perimeter one more time, taking the long way back to the guardhouse to drop off my tablet and sign out. The night was clear and cold. Stars everywhere. The kind of desert night that normally would have made me feel small in a good way. Tonight they just made me feel alone. I pulled up to the guardhouse around 3:30. The place was empty. Rosa must have stepped out. Fine by me. I didn't feel like another weird conversation. I swiped my keycard at the door and went in. The air inside was stuffy, like the AC had been off too long. I headed to the back room, where we keep the patrol equipment. That's when I noticed it. The terminal in the corner was on. I'd seen that terminal every day for 14 months. It was always locked down, black screen with a keycard slot that nobody ever used. I figured it was some old system they kept around for regulations or something, but now the screen was glowing blue. The login prompt was active. I looked around. Still nobody there. Just me and a terminal that shouldn't be on. I walked over, curious. Next to the keyboard was a sticky note with "System Refresh Complete," printed in block letters. No signature. I hesitated, then swiped my keycard through the reader. The screen changed immediately. No password prompt, no security questions. Just straight to a video feed. "What the hell?" I muttered. The image was grainy, black and white. Poor quality, like old security footage. It showed what looked like a large concrete chamber, smooth walls, high ceiling, industrial lighting from above. But it was what sat in the middle that made me lean in closer. A spacecraft. Not like anything I'd seen before. Not even in the classified hangars I was cleared for. It was bulbous, maybe 30 feet across, with an elongated section that might have been the cockpit. The hull was damaged, badly. Long scorch marks ran across one side, and part of the outer shell looked melted and warped. Re-entry damage, had to be. I've seen the remains of experimental aircraft before. This wasn't one of ours. I looked for a timestamp, location info, anything, nothing. Just the static image of this thing. No audio either. Just silence and this impossible ship. I checked the system for other feeds, other angles. Nothing. Just this one camera, this one view. I heard a door slam outside. Quickly, I swiped my card again, and the screen went dark. I moved to the equipment rack, pretending to check my gear, when Rosa walked in. "Still here?" she asked, her voice flat. "Just finishing up," I said, keeping it casual. "Thought I'd recharge the radio before I clocked out." She nodded, didn't say anything else. Just walked to her desk and started typing. I finished up quickly and left, my mind racing. That had to be inside Hangar E9, had to be. I came in early the next night, couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. I needed another look. The guardhouse was quiet. Different supervisor tonight, Caden, a younger guy who mostly stayed in the break room watching videos on his phone. Perfect. I waited until he disappeared down the hall, then swiped my card at the terminal. The screen lit up immediately, showing the same feed. The spacecraft was still there, unmoved. Same damage, same position. But now I had time to really study it. The hull was made of something I couldn't identify. Not metal, exactly. More like ceramic, but with a strange texture even in the grainy footage. The cockpit section had what looked like glass or a transparent material, but it was dark inside. Couldn't see if anyone or anything was in there. Around the ship, the concrete floor was marked with what looked like containment protocols, lines and symbols I recognized from hazmat procedures. This thing crashed, and they recovered it, and they're keeping it hidden, so hidden that the hangar itself comes and goes from the maps. I spent almost an hour watching the feed. Nothing moved, nothing changed. Eventually I heard Caden coming back and shut it down. For the rest of my shift I kept thinking about that ship, what it meant, where it came from. Night 3, and I was back at that terminal the minute I clocked in. Rosa was on duty again, but she was outside doing a perimeter check when I arrived. The feed hadn't changed much. Same ship, same room. But I noticed something I'd missed before. A control panel on the far wall with what looked like a pressure door beside it. Some kind of airlock system, maybe. I studied every inch of that screen. Memorized the layout. Tried to guess the dimensions of the room, the ship, everything I could. This time, I noticed a small icon in the corner of the screen. I clicked it, hoping for more camera angles or information. Instead, the image zoomed in slightly on the cockpit section. The glass, or whatever it was, still looked dark. But with the zoom, I could make out some kind of reflection or movement inside. Something shifting in the darkness. Just a shadow, maybe. Hard to tell with the poor quality. I backed out of the zoom when I heard footsteps approaching. Rosa came in, looked at me, then at the dark screen. "Everything all right, Austin?" she asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just checking the patrol routes." She nodded, but I could feel her watching me as I walked out. By the 4th night, I couldn't stand it anymore. I needed answers. I went straight to the terminal when my shift started. The feed was already up. I didn't even need to swipe my card this time. I stared at the ship, willing something to happen, and then it did. The feed glitched. Just for a second, a flicker like bad reception. When the image stabilized, I saw it. Movement behind the cockpit glass. Something wet and dark shifting in the darkness. Not a reflection this time. Something alive. I felt cold sweat break out on my forehead. Whatever was in that ship, it was moving. The feed glitched again, worse this time. When it came back, the cockpit was dark again. Still, like nothing had happened. But I'd seen it, and I knew where to find it. I grabbed my crowbar from my patrol vehicle's emergency kit and checked my sidearm. Standard issue for security contractors, a 9mm I hoped I wouldn't need to use. I didn't bother signing out or making excuses, just got in my vehicle and drove straight for the coordinates, where I'd found hangar E9. The hangar was there, just like before, looming dark against the night sky. I parked about 50 yards away and approached on foot, flashlight off, moving quietly. The massive steel sliding doors were still sealed shut. The keypad was still dead, but I wasn't looking for permission anymore. I wedged the crowbar into the seam between the doors. Years of desert sand had gotten into the tracks, making them stiff, but not impossible. I put my weight into it, feeling the metal groan as it gave way inch by inch. The gap widened. 6 inches, a foot, 2 feet, enough to slip through. I turned on my flashlight and swept the beam across what lay beyond. Not a hangar floor like I expected. Instead, a concrete ramp leading down. Underground. I stood at the threshold, the desert night at my back and this dark passage in front of me. I drew my weapon, held it ready alongside my flashlight. Something was down there. Something they were hiding. Something alive. I took a deep breath and stepped inside, my boots echoing on the concrete as I began to descend. The beam of my flashlight cut through the dusty air, revealing nothing but more darkness ahead. I went down that concrete ramp with my flashlight in one hand and my sidearm in the other. The beam cut through the darkness, bouncing off the walls as I descended. The ramp wasn't steep, but it kept going. 20 feet, 30 feet, 40. The air changed as I went deeper. First thing that hit me was the smell, salt and something else, like metal that's been left out too long. Kind of reminded me of blood mixed with seawater. It wasn't strong, but it was there, hanging in the still air. My boots made soft echoes against the concrete. I kept my breathing steady, the way they taught us in training. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Stay calm. Stay focused. The ramp finally leveled out after about 50 feet down. I swept my flashlight across the space in front of me and froze. There it was, the spacecraft. Sitting right there in the middle of a large concrete chamber, exactly like I'd seen on the camera feed. Holy shit, I whispered to myself. It wasn't huge, probably about the size of a commercial van, maybe 20 feet long and 10 feet tall at its highest point. The shape was weird, though, not like any aircraft I'd ever seen. It had a rounded front section that tapered back to a more angular rear, no visible wings or standard propulsion system. I approached slowly, keeping my gun ready. The chamber was silent except for the sound of my footsteps and breathing. My flashlight beam caught the edges of the ship's hull, revealing scorch marks and blisters. Entry damage, I guessed. Whatever this thing was, it had come through our atmosphere hard. I circled around to the front, where the cockpit should be. There was a glass-like section, but I couldn't see inside. It was covered with some kind of hardened resin, yellowish and completely opaque. The stuff looked organic, almost like dried honey or amber, but thicker. I tapped it with my flashlight. Solid. "What the hell happened to you?" I said out loud, not expecting an answer. I continued my circuit around the craft, looking for any markings or identification. On the side, I found a small metal plaque bolted to the hull. I wiped away a thin layer of dust with my thumb and aimed my flashlight at it. The plaque read CRV-24 in official-looking lettering. Below that were 3 names: Benny Carroll, Lewis Jenkins, Brian Hall, and beneath the names, in smaller text, presumed lost, 1972. I read it twice. 1972, I'd never heard of any mission called CRV-24, not in any of the briefings, not in any of the security protocols, and 1972 was way before my time, Vietnam era. But this didn't look like any Vietnam-era craft I'd ever seen in museums or documentaries. I moved to the back of the ship, where the hull curved down to what looked like a rear hatch. It was hanging partially open, a gap of about 2 feet between the edge of the door and the frame. just enough space for someone to squeeze through. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to back away, call this in, wait for a proper team. But I knew what would happen if I did. They'd shut this down, deny everything, maybe even make me disappear. I'd already crossed a line by breaking into this hangar. I holstered my weapon, keeping the flashlight in my right hand. I sucked in a breath and squeezed through the gap into the ship. The interior was tight, not much bigger than the inside of a small helicopter. My flashlight beam revealed 3 pilot seats arranged in a triangular formation, 1 in front, 2 behind. Each seat had what remained of flight suits still strapped in place, but they were torn to shreds. The fabric wasn't just ripped, it looked like it had burst outward from the inside, violently shredded. There were no bodies, just empty, torn suits still buckled into their seats. "Jesus," I whispered, moving my light across the scene. The seats themselves had impressions in them, like someone had been sitting there not too long ago. The cushions were deformed in a way that suggested weight had been pressing down on them. But the flight suits were empty. As I moved my flashlight around, I noticed something else. Thin, fibrous threads, like spider silk but stronger looking, connecting each seat to the walls and ceiling. They formed an intricate web throughout the cabin. I leaned in closer to examine one of the threads, careful not to touch it. It had a slight sheen to it, reflecting my flashlight beam. The ship's control panel was dead. No lights, no power. Just blank screens and switches set to various positions. Some kind of dried residue covered parts of it, the same yellowish material that coated the cockpit glass. I moved behind the pilot's seat, sweeping my light across the floor. Something caught my eye, a small, sealed plastic pouch wedged between the seat and the wall. I reached down and picked it up. It was about the size of a paperback book, sealed tight with what looked like military-grade plastic. Inside, I could see what appeared to be a journal or logbook. The cover was dark blue with no visible markings through the plastic. I slipped the pouch into my jacket pocket. Whatever this was, I needed to examine it somewhere else. This place felt wrong in every way possible, and I didn't want to stick around any longer than necessary. As I turned to leave, my flashlight beam caught something on the ceiling of the craft. A small circular pattern, almost like a drain, but with those same fibrous threads extending from it in all directions. I backed away toward the exit, keeping my eyes on that spot until I squeezed back through the hatch opening. I sat in my truck with the engine off, about a mile from my apartment building. The parking lot was empty this time of night. I pulled out the plastic pouch I'd taken from the spacecraft and turned it over in my hands. It was sealed tight, like one of those food saver bags. Inside was what looked like a standard military logbook with a black cover. My hands were steady as I tore open the seal. The book slid out easily, and I flipped on my overhead light to get a better look. The cover was plain black with no markings except for CRV-24 stamped in the corner. The binding was worn but intact. I opened it to the first page. The handwriting was neat, almost mechanical. Military precision. Flight log, CRV-24. Mission designation, Titan approach. Crew, Capt. Benjamin Carroll, Lieutenant Louis Jenkins, Lieutenant Brian Hall. Launch date, March 17, 1972. I paused. 1972. This matched the plaque on the ship, but it made no sense. We didn't have the technology for a mission to Saturn's moon in the 70s. Hell, we barely had it now. I kept reading. The first entries were routine. Coordinates, system checks, transmission logs. Captain Carroll noted everything with exacting detail. Oxygen levels, fuel consumption, crew rotations. Nothing unusual until day 3. Day 3. Jenkins reporting unusual instrument readings. Gravitational anomalies not consistent with flight path calculations. Hall believes it's equipment malfunction. Will monitor. Day 4 mentioned the same anomalies, stronger now. Day 5 noted communication interference. By day 6, they'd lost contact with mission control. Day 6, complete comm blackout. Carroll insists we continue as planned. Jenkins disagrees. I'm with Carroll. We've come too far to turn back now. The handwriting changed here. Must have been Jenkins or Hall taking over the log. The entries grew shorter, more tense. Day 7. Approaching Titan ahead of schedule. Not possible according to our calculations. Carol says to trust the instruments. Day 8. Visual contact with Titan. Something's wrong with the surface. Moving patterns visible from orbit. Not consistent with NASA briefings. I turned to the final page, labeled Day 9. My hand started shaking as I read. Day 9. We've made contact, not with the surface, with something else. It came through the hull, without breaching it, like it passed through solid matter. Carol touched it first. God help us, it's spreading through him. Threads, like silk, but wrong. Jenkins is screaming. I can't help them. It's in the ship now. It's in the air. I can feel it in my lungs. It's cold, like breathing seawater. It wants something, not to kill us, to use us, to learn, to... The entry ended mid-sentence. The rest of the page was blank. I flipped through the remaining pages. Nothing. Just empty paper. I checked my watch. 4:30 a.m. I still had time before my shift ended. I needed to document everything. I grabbed my phone and started taking pictures, every page of the journal, front to back. I went methodically, making sure each shot was clear. When I finished with the journal, I decided I needed to go back and photograph the ship too. I drove back to Hangar E9, my mind racing. The structure was still there, exactly as I'd left it. The doors were still slightly ajar where I'd pried them open. I slipped back inside and down the ramp. The spacecraft sat in the middle of the chamber, silent and waiting. I approached it carefully, phone ready. I took dozens of photos. The hull, the damage patterns, the plaque with the names. I crawled back inside through the rear hatch and photographed everything. The empty flight suits, the control panel, the fibrous threads connecting everything. I paid special attention to that circular pattern on the ceiling, taking multiple shots from different angles. As I was about to leave, I noticed something I'd missed before. A small storage compartment under one of the seats. I pried it open and found a metal case inside. It contained what looked like rock samples, 3 small chunks of something dark and porous. I photographed them but didn't touch them. Some instinct told me to leave them where they were. I squeezed back out of the ship and checked the time. 5:15 a.m. My shift would end at 6:20. I needed to get this information somewhere safe. I hurried back to the guardhouse, planning to upload the photos to a secure server. The building was quiet when I arrived. Rosa would be doing her final perimeter check. I had maybe 15 minutes. I sat at the terminal and swiped my key card. The login screen appeared, and I quickly connected my phone. I tried transferring the first batch of photos, the journal pages. The progress bar started moving, then froze. Error flashed on the screen. I tried again. Same result. I tried sending just one image. The file appeared to upload, but when I checked the server folder, all I found was static, a corrupted image file. I tried every photo, each one uploaded, and each one corrupted instantly. It was like something was actively preventing the information from being saved. Frustrated, I looked up at the main screen. The live camera feed of the spacecraft that I'd been watching for days was gone. In its place was text. CRV-24 status, contained, do not access. I stared at the message, my heart pounding. The system knew I'd been there. It knew what I'd done. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly disconnected my phone, closing the upload window. Rosa walked in just as the screen went back to its default display. "Finishing up?" she asked. "Yeah, just checking something," I said, standing up. "All quiet tonight." She nodded, but her eyes lingered on me a second too long. I signed out and headed to my truck. The sky was beginning to lighten in the east. Dawn was coming. I felt exhausted, but wired at the same time. I needed sleep, but I wasn't sure I wanted to be alone with my thoughts. As I walked across the parking lot, I noticed something odd. My boots made a squelching sound with each step. I stopped and looked down. The ground was dry. It hadn't rained in weeks. But the sound continued with my next step. Squish, squish. I got to my truck and sat in the driver's seat. I lifted one foot to examine my boot. The desert sand stuck to the sole was completely dry. I pressed my thumb against it, and water seeped out. Salt water. I could smell it now, that same briny scent from the spacecraft. I drove to my apartment in a daze. My feet felt cold and wet the entire ride. When I finally got home, I kicked off my boots at the door and nearly gagged. They were soaked through, and a small puddle of salt water formed on the floor beneath them. I stripped off my socks and checked my feet. They were dry, but my boots were filled with seawater. In the middle of the Nevada desert, I stumbled to my bedroom, too tired to think clearly. The smell of brine followed me. It was in my clothes, my hair. My bunk reeked of it. I collapsed onto my bed anyway, too exhausted to care. I slept through the day, waking only when my alarm went off for my next shift. My head felt foggy, like I'd been drugged. I sat up and rubbed my eyes. My notebook lay open on the bedside table. I didn't remember leaving it there. I picked it up and froze. The pages were filled with drawings I didn't remember making, circular patterns spiraling inward, like whirlpools or galaxies. Complex, circuit-like designs that hurt my eyes when I tried to focus on them directly. And between the drawings, notes in my handwriting, but not my thoughts. The cold between stars. It waits in the depths. 3 become 1. The pattern repeats. I dropped the notebook like it had burned me. It was my handwriting, my pen, but those weren't my thoughts. I got to work early that night. My head felt clearer than it had the day before, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with me. Those notes in my handwriting that weren't my thoughts kept bothering me. I'd stuffed the notebook into my kitchen drawer before leaving, not wanting to look at it anymore. The guardhouse lights were on when I pulled into the lot. Rosa's car was parked in its usual spot. I checked my watch, still 20 minutes before my shift officially started. Perfect timing to ask about those new photos that wouldn't upload. I pushed open the door and found Rosa sitting at the main desk, staring at her computer screen. She didn't look up when I walked in. "Evening," I said. Rosa turned her head slowly. Too slowly, like someone had put her on half speed. "Austin," she said. Her voice sounded normal enough, but something was off about her face. "Your shift begins in 19 minutes. "Yeah, I'm early. Wanted to check something on the system." She blinked. The movement looked deliberate, like she had to remember to do it. Her pupils were huge, taking up most of her iris despite the bright fluorescent lights overhead. "I have your new patrol orders," she said, sliding a tablet across the desk. I picked it up, scanning the screen. My regular route was there, but with an addition that made my stomach drop. "Hangar E9, since when is that on the official rotation? Your name has been added to the guard rotation for Hangar E9, Rosa said. "You will inspect it twice per shift. The entry code is 5972. The door has been repaired." I stared at her. "Rosa, 2 days ago you acted like that hangar didn't exist. Now I'm on rotation for it?" She blinked again. 3 seconds down, 3 seconds up. "Your name has been added to the guard rotation for Hangar E9, she repeated. Exactly the same way. I heard movement behind her and saw Caden coming from the break room. He walked with the same weird timing as Rosa, deliberate steps with a slight pause between each one. His eyes had that same unfocused look. "Hey, Caden," I called out. "You know anything about this Hangar E9 assignment?" He turned his head toward me, but his eyes didn't quite focus. "Hangar E9 requires regular inspection. Your name has been added to the rotation." Same words. Same flat tone. I felt a chill run up my spine. "Right," I said, backing toward the door. "I'll get on that." Neither of them responded. Rosa went back to staring at her screen. Caden stood in place, not moving at all. I got the hell out of there. Something was seriously wrong with both of them. I'd known Rosa for over a year, and while she'd always been professional, she'd never been robotic, and Caden was usually friendly, always cracking jokes about the desert heat. I got in my truck and sat there for a minute, trying to process what was happening. Rosa and Caden were acting like they'd been drugged or hypnotized, and now I was officially assigned to guard a hangar that didn't exist a few days ago, containing a spacecraft that shouldn't exist at all. I started the engine. I needed answers, and there was only one place to get them. The drive to Hangar E9 took about 15 minutes. The structure looked the same from the outside, unassuming, sand-colored metal building in the middle of nowhere. But now, I knew what was inside. I punched the code Rosa had given me, 52972, into the keypad by the door. The light turned green, and the heavy door slid open with a mechanical hum. The ramp stretched down into darkness, just like before. I pulled out my flashlight and started down. The air changed immediately. It wasn't just the salt metal smell this time. It was warmer down here, humid, like a greenhouse. The desert never felt humid. I reached the bottom of the ramp and swept my light across the chamber. The spacecraft sat in the center, just as I'd left it. But something had changed. I moved closer, keeping my light trained on the cockpit section. The glass, or whatever it was, had cracked open. There was a jagged hole in the front, big enough for a person to squeeze through. Fresh liquid dripped from the edges of the break, pooling on the concrete floor below. The liquid had the same yellowish tint as the resin I'd seen before. I drew my sidearm and approached slowly. The liquid on the floor had a consistency like thick honey, but it moved slightly, almost like it was breathing. I kept my distance from it and focused on the opening in the cockpit. "Hello?" I called out. My voice echoed in the chamber. "Anyone in there?" No response. I holstered my weapon and pulled myself up onto the hull, careful to avoid the dripping edges of the broken cockpit glass. The opening was jagged but wide enough for me to fit through. I shined my light inside before entering. The interior had changed dramatically. The control panels were completely covered in the organic resin I'd seen before, but now it was soft and pulsing slightly, like the surface of a lung. The fibrous threads connecting everything were thicker now, almost like veins, and they twitched occasionally. I hesitated, then squeezed through the opening. The air inside was thick and warm, making it harder to breathe. My flashlight beam caught movement in one of the pilot seats. I swung the light toward it and froze. In the captain's seat sat what might have once been Benny Carroll. The shape was humanoid, wearing shreds of what looked like a flight suit, but the body was all wrong. It was elongated, the limbs too long and bent at impossible angles. The head turned toward my light, revealing a face that had split vertically down the middle, opening like a flower to show rows of tooth-like structures inside. I stumbled back, hitting my shoulder against the cockpit opening. The thing in the seat didn't move toward me. It just watched, its eyes, if you could call them that, reflecting my flashlight beam with an oily sheen. "You came back," it said. The voice sounded like water flowing through pipes, gurgling and bubbling, but somehow forming words. "We knew you would." "You came back," the thing gurgled. I stood frozen, my flashlight beam locked on what used to be Benny Carroll. My mind tried to process what I was seeing, but nothing made sense. The figure shifted in the seat, bones cracking as it moved. Its skin looked wet, almost translucent. 52 years, it said, voice bubbling like water through rusted pipes. Finally, someone with clearance. My hand moved to my sidearm, unsnapping the holster. The beam of my flashlight trembled slightly as Carol's face split into something like a smile. Too many teeth. All wrong. "Don't," Carol said, raising a hand that bent at impossible angles. "We've waited so long." I pulled my gun anyway, aiming it at the center of his chest. "What the hell happened to you?" Carol's head tilted at an unnatural angle. Water dripped from his mouth as he spoke. We found it, or it found us, near Titan. A noise to my left made me swing the flashlight. In the other seats, similar forms were stirring. Jenkins and Hall, I realized. Their bodies twisted as they woke, limbs unfolding like wet paper. Their skin had the same translucent quality, moving like thick gel over their bones. Jesus Christ, I whispered. Not quite, Carol said with that terrible smile. The others are waking now. Good. We should all explain. Jenkins' head rotated toward me, his neck stretching farther than humanly possible. His eyes reflected my light like mirrors. Hall's body seemed to pour into a sitting position, bones visible through his skin as they realigned. I kept my gun raised, moving back until I felt the hull against my back. Explain what? It wasn't a ship, Carol said, gesturing around him with fingers that bent backward. Not really. What we found near Titan. It wasn't a vehicle. It was alive. The anomaly, Jenkins added, his voice like stones grinding underwater. It passed through the hull. It needed us, Hall continued, to bring it home. I tried to steady my breathing. What are you talking about? Carol leaned forward, and I saw his bones shift beneath his skin. It's been growing here, through the water system, the coffee machine in the break room. Rosa, Caden, everyone who drinks it. But not you, Jenkins said, eyes fixed on me. You bring your own water, Hall added. We've noticed. My mind raced back to Rosa and Caden's blank stares, their synchronized movements. The salt water from my boots. The notebook filled with writing I didn't remember. You're resistant, Carol said. That's why you were assigned here, to be the next courier. I wasn't assigned, I said. I applied. After Afghanistan. The three of them made the same noise, something between a laugh and water going down a drain. You think so, Hall said. Your file was flagged, Jenkins added. We needed someone new, Carol finished. The others are too far gone now. I tightened my grip on my gun. What the hell do you want from me? They moved in unison, each rising from their seats with fluid, impossible movements. Their bodies seemed to pour upward rather than stand. We need to spread, Carol said. It's been contained here too long. 52 years, Jenkins echoed. Waiting, Hall added. They moved toward me, three bodies moving as one, arms reaching with fingers that stretched like taffy. I fired. The first bullet hit Carol square in the chest. It passed through him like he was made of water, leaving a hole that sealed immediately. I fired again, and again. 6 shots total, the sound deafening in the small space. Each bullet passed through their bodies without effect. The holes closed instantly, rippling like disturbed puddles. Shit, I muttered, backing up until I hit the jagged opening in the cockpit glass. They kept coming, their movements synchronized, faces split in identical smiles. I turned and scrambled through the opening, feeling the jagged edge tear my uniform and slice into my shoulder. I didn't care. I hit the hull and half slid, half fell to the concrete floor, landing hard on my side. I scrambled to my feet and ran. Behind me, I heard a sound like water pouring from a height. I glanced back to see the three of them flowing through the cockpit opening, their bodies stretching and reforming as they poured onto the hull. I sprinted up the concrete ramp, my boots slipping on something wet. The door was still open at the top. I burst through it into the cool night air and ran straight for my vehicle. My hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. The engine roared to life, and I slammed it into gear, tires spinning on the packed earth as I accelerated away from hangar E9. In the rearview mirror, I saw them, 3 shapes, standing at the hangar entrance, perfectly still, watching me go. Their forms were silhouetted against the darkness of the hangar, unnaturally tall and thin. They didn't follow. They just watched. And somehow, that was worse. I didn't think about what I was doing until I was already doing it. Just grabbed the 3 industrial-sized bleach containers from the maintenance closet and threw them in my truck. I knew the water treatment facility would be empty, this time of night. Security doesn't patrol it regularly, just a quick drive-by every few hours. I'd timed it. The facility itself wasn't much, just a small concrete building with a metal roof about a quarter mile from the main base. Most people don't even notice it. I parked behind it where the cameras had blind spots and grabbed the bleach jugs from my truck. Getting in was easy. My security badge worked on the door. Inside was basically a big room with pipes, pumps, and a huge metal tank. The place smelled like chlorine and metal. I found the access hatch on top of the main tank and unscrewed it. I didn't hesitate, opened the first jug and dumped it straight in. The bleach splashed and the fumes made my eyes water. Then the second jug. Then the third. I watched the chemicals swirl in the water below. It wouldn't be enough. I looked around the maintenance shed attached to the facility, found a shelf of chemicals, algicides, pH adjusters, descaling agents. I grabbed everything, bottles of acid for cleaning the filters, some stuff labeled corrosive and toxic. Dumped it all in. The mixture bubbled and the fumes got worse. I started coughing. "This should kill whatever's in the water," I said out loud to nobody. I was screwing the access hatch back on when the alarms started. Loud, pulsing wails that echoed through the small building. Red lights flashing on the walls. The system must have detected the chemical levels spiking. I could have run. Maybe should have. But I just sat down on a metal folding chair and waited. 5 minutes later, the door burst open and 4 security guards rushed in with weapons drawn. "Hands up! Don't move!" one of them shouted. I raised my hand slowly. Their eyes were clear and focused. Normal. Not like Rosa and Caden with their blank stares. These guys hadn't been affected yet. "I'm not armed," I said. They cuffed me quickly and efficiently. No one asked questions. One of them spoke into his radio. "Subject detained at water treatment. No resistance." They marched me outside to a waiting vehicle. The night air felt cool after the chemical fumes inside. As they put me in the back of the security SUV, I noticed more vehicles arriving, people in white suits climbing out with testing equipment. The ride to the security building took less than 10 minutes. They put me in a small room with a metal table and 2 chairs. No windows. Just a camera in the corner with a blinking red light. I sat there for what felt like hours, hands still cuffed, before the door finally opened. Commander Christopher Espinoza walked in. I'd only seen him a few times before, usually at base-wide briefings. Tall guy, silver hair, the kind of face that's seen a lot of shit over the years. He had a folder under his arm, and a look on his face I couldn't read. He sat down across from me, placed the folder on the table, and studied me for a long moment. "You want to tell me why one of my security contractors just contaminated the base water supply with enough chemicals to kill everyone here?" His voice was calm, measured. "I had to stop it," I said. "Stop what, exactly?" I took a deep breath. Something came back on that spacecraft in Hangar E9, the one that's been hidden. It's in the water. It's changing people. Espinoza's expression didn't change. He just opened the folder and glanced at some papers inside. "Tell me everything," he said. "From the beginning." So I did. I told him about finding Hangar E9 when it wasn't on the maps, about Rosa's strange behavior, about finding the spacecraft and the logbook, about the 3 astronauts who came back wrong from Titan in 1972, about how they said it was spreading through the water system, changing people who drank from the coffee machine. I told him how bullets passed right through them like they were made of water, how they had been waiting for decades, how their skin was translucent and their bones moved in ways bones shouldn't move. Espinoza listened without interrupting. He didn't write anything down, just watched me with those steady eyes of his. When I finished, he closed the folder. "That's quite a story," he said. "It's all true," I said. "Check the hangar. It's there. The ship is there." Espinoza stood up. "Wait here." He left the room, and I was alone again with the camera's blinking light. My shoulder hurt from where I'd cut it escaping through the cockpit glass. My hands were sweaty in the cuffs. An hour passed, maybe 2. Then the door opened again. Espinoza came back in with another man in a white lab coat. "We sent teams to Hangar E9, Espinoza said as he sat down. "There is a spacecraft there, as you described." My heart jumped. "And the crew? Carroll, Jenkins, and Hall?" "No sign of them. The ship is empty." The man in the lab coat spoke up. "We've tested the water system. Whatever contamination might have been there has been neutralized by your chemical dump. The system's now showing dangerously high levels of chlorine and other toxins, but nothing unusual." "They're still out there," I said. "They got out before you arrived." Espinoza and the lab coat exchanged a look. "Mr. King," Espinoza said, turning back to me, "you've created a base-wide emergency. We've had to shut down the entire water system. People are being checked for chemical exposure." "Better than being taken over by whatever came back on that ship," I said. Espinoza sighed. "I'm placing you under psychiatric evaluation. Dr. Winters here will oversee your care until we determine next steps." "You don't believe me," I said. "I believe you believe it," Espinoza replied. "But right now, all we have is a contaminated water supply and a security contractor who's clearly experiencing some kind of breakdown." They transferred me to a secure medical facility that night. I spent 3 days in a room with a hospital bed and a guard outside. Different doctors came in, asked questions, took notes. They gave me pills that I pretended to swallow, but hid under my tongue until they left. On the 4th day, they moved me to a psychiatric facility somewhere outside Las Vegas, a place for military personnel who'd cracked under pressure. The doctors there were actually decent. They listened, ran tests, checked me for everything from brain tumors to drug use. After a week, the head doctor, a woman named Dr. Chen, came to my room with my file. "Medically, you're perfectly sound," she said, sitting in the chair across from my bed. "No signs of schizophrenia, no tumors, no drug interactions. Your psychological profile shows acute stress reaction, but no underlying psychosis." "So, I'm sane," I said. "Technically, yes. But you've experienced a traumatic event, or believe you have, which amounts to the same thing for your brain chemistry." She closed the file. "You're being released tomorrow. Commander Espinoza called this morning. Your security clearance has been permanently revoked. Your contract is terminated." I nodded. It wasn't a surprise. "What about the spacecraft? Did they tell you what they found?" I asked. "I'm not privy to that information," she said, standing up. "Focus on recovery, Mr. King. Whatever happened, it's over now." But it wasn't over. Not really. Even after I was released and back in my apartment packing my things, I could feel it. The memory of those 3 men with their translucent skin and too many teeth. I checked my notebook, the one where I'd found those strange spiral patterns and notes I didn't remember writing. The pages were clean now, no more patterns appearing overnight. That was something at least. Still, every morning the first thing I did was check my boots for salt water. They stayed dry, but the habit stuck. As I taped up the last box of my belongings, I made a decision. I wasn't staying in Nevada, not anywhere near a desert. I'd find somewhere with rain and rivers and lakes, somewhere far from the sand and secrets of Area 51,